Hi, we're talking about Your Money Matters on NDTV Profit, and my name is Alex Matthew. Today, it's all about calculations. On the one hand, we're going to talk about how you should pay back your loans. When is it beneficial for you to prepay your loans? And what is the order that you should consider prepaying your loans or getting rid of your loans if you are paying different rates of interest? That is, if you have a personal loan and a home loan, or some other type of loan. There are a few strategies that you can employ. And the second part of this conversation is a very interesting calculation which actually might throw up a situation where you can earn more on an EPF in your employee provident fund than you could earn in equity post-tax. I know that it's not a like-to-like comparison, but still it's an interesting calculation to consider and to look at. But first, let's talk about loans. And joining me on the first part of this conversation is Mrin Agarwal, who's a financial educator and founder of Finsafe India. Mrin, thanks so much for taking the time. First up, let me ask you this. From a prudent financial planning perspective, how much loan is okay? And how much should your EMI be as a percentage of your take-home?
Good evening, Alex, and nice to be here today. Well, from a prudent financial planning perspective, the EMI as a proportion of your take home needs to be limited to 30%. And, the strange thing is that I see a lot of people who are at this 50-70% of their take home going towards EMIs. That's just too high. You're just living your life in debt. So I think smart way of borrowing is to keep your EMIs limited to 30% of your take home. And this is all your EMIs. It could be a home loan, personal loan, car loan, whatever it is, total EMI does not exceed 30%.
As much as the prudence makes a lot of sense, I think, and a lot of young people, Mrin, are buying into this idea of prudence, and they want to live their lives on their own terms. But the old situation was that you start earning, you work towards buying a home. And unfortunately, the reality of it is that places like Mumbai, places like even Bengaluru now, places like Pune, real estate, New Delhi, real estate is getting so much costlier than it was even 5 years back, that buying a home is incredibly difficult. And so the argument that people make is that in the initial years when they're earning slightly less, they can stretch a little bit, and when their earnings go up, then automatically as a percentage of their take home, the percentage goes down. Is that the right approach in your opinion?
Yes and no, because finally I always say that, we can do all these calculations on Excel, but then if you're not happy about it and it's feeling very bad and it's affecting you, then obviously you should do what you want to. But, the issue in doing the stretch is that, you kind of get attuned to living your life on that stretch. And that's what we are seeing today, right? Like we're seeing such a high incidence of loans when you look at the whole household debt, right? So I think the issue, what happens is that you get used to living on that particular stretch, and then like bringing it down to the 30% is a little tough. So I would actually say wait it out for some time. And, of course, there's this whole buy versus rent argument that is there to say that why buy at all, just stay on rent. So I would say enjoy your life on rent when you're young, and when you can really afford it, then look at buying that house.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, which is not to say that you should never buy. You should absolutely buy, because when you stop earning, that is a security that you will have. But Mrin, absolutely buy into that philosophy. But what if you have a home loan? And this comes to the first calculation that you've shared with me. Can you take me through it? Because you've assumed a loan amount of 80 lakhs, which I think is normal in a city like Mumbai. You can't get away with not taking a large loan. And I'm glad that you've taken a slightly larger loan, because I think a lot more people can relate to this then. The tenure is 20 years and the interest is 8%, which again is a pretty normal amount if you consider the longer term, right? You might be able to get it less right now because the interest rates are lower, but then the average cost will be that much. So how do you work out something like this? What are the strategies that you would employ?
Yeah, so this was more, because I get a lot of questions from people saying that I just received my bonus or I've just got some extra money and should I prepay or should I invest? Because what happens is that, typically one thinks of it like this, that my loan is at 8% and what I can maybe generate from my investments, especially if it is in equities, is going to be between 10 to 12%. So then, the question then remains that why should I prepay the money? Why don't I just go ahead and invest? So we'll take this, I'll give you the answer in two parts. So the first part of it is really in terms of what happens if you do a repayment. So let's say that, in this particular case, you have some extra amount of money and you're prepaying 1 lakh rupees every year, right? So what happens due to that is that you, of course, save a lot on the interest. So versus the 80.5 lakh rupees as interest, you're almost saving around 17 and a half lakhs as interest. The bigger aspect is that your loan tenor is falling from 20 years to almost 16 years, right? So you're repaying your loan 4 years earlier, right? So that is if you do the prepayment every year. Now, if you say, no, I don't want to do the prepayment, I want to go ahead and I want to invest this money every month. So, assuming a 12% return, the in 20 years, that amount, the 1 lakh rupees invested annually every year, will lead you to about 76 lakhs, right? Now, this is where the numbers are concerned. So, what you're weighing for yourself is, do I want to prepay my loan 4 years earlier and save on 17 lakhs interest? Or do I want to have 76 lakhs wealth? And, Alex, there's no right or wrong in this. It all depends on your mindset. If you feel that I want to get debt free earlier, then go in for prepaying the debt. If you feel no, I want to create wealth and utilize it for other purposes, and of course, you believe that your income will increase, and due to that, you'll anyway be able to prepay the loan earlier, then go in for that. But yes, you should have this perspective of what you can get on both sides.
Yeah, it's important that you point that out as well. And for everybody tuning in that's not familiar with this scenario, in a home loan, what happens is that you're better off prepaying in the first half of the home loan, because the way that the EMI is constructed is that in the first half, the interest component of the EMI that you pay every month is much larger, and in the second half, particularly towards the end of the home loan, the only thing that you're paying effectively in that EMI is the principal. And so if you get rid of the principal early, the interest incidence comes down quite dramatically. Now, Mrin, it's important to point out that this is a pretty simple calculation. We haven't even taken into account the fact that a lot of people in the past were also taking advantage of the old tax regime, where they were saying interest cost is deductible from your taxable income, and to that extent they were saving a maximum of 60,000 rupees per individual practically, and if it was a repayment by two individuals, then you could save potentially double of that, right? So we're not taking that into account, because I think a lot of people have moved to the new tax regime. Would you agree?
Yes, of course, the calculations did not take into account the tax regime. And the other point that I do want to point out is that at the end of the day, you're still paying the interest, right? So even if you're getting the tax benefit, there is still an interest outgo that is happening.
But then it comes to a few scenarios, right? We've assumed in this first scenario that you will get 12% over the course of the lifetime of the investment, which at this point, Mrin, it must be said, it makes sense. But then who knows, in 10 years, you might have a lower rate of growth for India and you might have to reset lower. So we're making certain base case assumptions. And of course, interest costs could also, by that argument, go down quite dramatically. It may not stay at 8%. So equally, that is fine. But having said that, there are a few more scenarios that we can build in, right? To say that apart from this home loan, you might have other loans as well. So if you have multiple loans, what kind of strategies would you employ if you're trying to pay them off?
Yeah, so the typical strategy always when people have multiple loans is to always focus on the high interest loans first. So like credit card loans or like personal loans, right? Because you always believe, okay, I'm paying 17%, 40% out here as interest. So let me first get rid of these loans. But I think that strategy works when you have only like high interest loans, and typically most of them are lower tenor in nature. But when you have a combination of loans, so for example, when you have like a personal loan and you have a home loan together, that strategy may not work because, by the very fact that the home loan, the actual absolute outgo that you have every month and for a longer tenor as well, creates a very big impact. So if I can just explain this through an example, that let us say you have a home loan for 50 lakhs at 8% for the next 20 years, and you also have a personal loan for 12% for the next 5 years, right? So the total outgo, the total interest outgo that you're going to have in both the cases is, put together is going to be about 52 lakhs over this 20-year period, right? Now, typically, if somebody has money and they decide that I want to prepay the personal loan first, and of course, everything is assumptions here that we've taken. And, one of the things that I want to call out is that each person really needs to sit down with their financial advisor and work this out for themselves, because there's so many different situations that can happen. And and it all depends on which is the year that you want to do the repayment as well. But let's say we've assumed over here that the repayment is going to be in year 3, and then from year 4 onwards, you're utilizing that extra amount to repay the home loan, right? So in this case, what happens is that your total interest outgo from 52 lakhs becomes 41 lakhs, right? Now, let us assume that you think that I am going to close the home loan first, right? Because there's a higher amount of outgo. So you're going to close the home loan from the second year onwards. You're going to start paying 2 EMIs. So of course, here what happens is that because you're closing the home loan first, and again, as you explained, that in the first 5 years, it is basically the interest component that is higher than the principal component. So due to that, the total outgo on interest will reduce to about 38 lakhs. So as I said, there could be a lot of permutations. It all depends upon what are the loans that a person has. Ideally, what you need to do is make a list of all of these loans, and then work on an Excel to really see what makes sense to basically pay off first. But I would think that when you have high value loans, your focus should actually be on paying off the high amount loans first.
Okay, so that makes sense. Let's talk about a couple more things. One in particular, right? Because in the current juncture, you have the interest rate regime, which is moving to a lower rate regime, right? So the Reserve Bank of India has been cutting interest rates. It is possible that you might have another couple of rate cuts. And a lot of people are assuming that a further 0.5 percentage points or 50 basis points will be shaved off. And that means that home loans will be heading lower, the cost of home loans, interest cost. So therefore, the question arises that in a falling interest rate regime, what should your approach be? Because the two levers that you can use to adjust, Mrin, one is the amount that you pay every month, and the other is the duration or the tenor that you pay. And that is true either when the rates are going up or when the rates are going down, right? So what is beneficial?
So when the interest rates are falling, clearly maintaining the same EMI is good, because what will happen is that the tenor is going to reduce. Since the interest rate has gone down, you're still paying a higher amount. So if you were to recalculate the EMI, then it will be a lower EMI, but you have decided to keep the higher EMI, which means that the tenor is going down. And it also really means that you're going to have a lower amount of interest outgo, and you're also going to close your loan faster, right? So of course, in the falling interest rate environment, it does make sense to ensure that you keep the EMI the same and let the tenor reduce. And of course, it's always helpful, irrespective of whether rates are going up or rates are going down, it's always helpful to make part payments, because part payments will always ensure that your interest outgo reduces. And, Alex, I think this is one of the things, right? Like, people don't realize that, even though the interest rate is at 8%, one feels that it's a very low rate and I'm generating a higher return on my investments. But the reality today is that the principal of the loan and the interest outgo is the same. So, for something that's worth 100 rupees, you're actually paying 200 rupees, right? And that's where I think the focus on any loan repayment really needs to be on reducing that absolute number.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a very important point that you raise. When you're thinking of your returns from investments, you think about how quickly it will double, right? And that simple rule of 72 formula. So in a very simple example, you divide your 72 by the rate of interest that you're earning. So if you're earning 7.2%, then you're doubling in 10 years. This is true when you're paying something as well. So I think you raise a very, very important point. The last point has to do with how to, a few things to get debt-free faster. You want to run through the list?
Yeah, I think taking a loan only if it's necessary. These days you have all sorts of loans. So of course, I would say just try to stick to the home loan. And certainly you don't need early wage access and BNPL and these sort of things. And of course, like keep increasing your repayments with the increasing income, and look at using windfall gains also to repay loans. And of course, keep that whole this whole aspect of getting debt free should be at top of your mind.
Got it. Absolutely. So, Mrin, thanks so much for this very important conversation. Hopefully, we've got people to look at their finances and drop their own calculations, because ultimately that's what you'll have to do. Thanks so much for taking the time.